students. Today we will discuss about one of the greatest critics of English literature, Dr. Samuel Johnson. As you know, Dr. Johnson was revered and highly respected as well as feared by all the contemporary writers, poets for his great erudition and scholarship, as well as his impartial appreciation without without any respect for the position or the amount of literature one has created. So Samuel Johnson, in his evaluation of Shakespeare, another great literature of English literature, has written about Shakespeare and the three unities. In his essay, he begins with his praise for Shakespeare, which is a very rare thing because Johnson scarcely praises any poet, any dramatist, or writer. So he tells that his works support no opinion with arguments, nor supply any faction with invectives. They can neither indulge vanity nor gratify malignity, but are read without any other reason than the desire of pleasure, and are therefore praised only as pleasure is obtained. So, Dr. Johnson has discovered in the works of Shakespeare the true objectivity on the part of an artist. Every art and artist, they should be objective without being subjective. Objectivity means when the artist or the art doesn't support or doesn't favor any particular idea, but very impartially projecting the experiences of the life. So, Dr. Johnson has found in the works of Shakespeare the highest degree of such objectivity, the objective correlative, which is later elaborated by T.S. Eliot in 20th century. And he is telling that ultimately all the works of Shakespeare is meant for pleasure and it only gives pleasure. There is no other aspect associated with it. Shakespeare has not produced anything for the scholars or for the academicians, but for the common man, for everyone, just to provide pleasure. So that is the greatest mark of art and a great artist. In page 113, he is writing, Shakespeare is above all writers, at least above all modern writers, the poet of nature, the poet that holds up to his readers a faithful mirror of manners and of life. So, as you know, the period of Dr. Johnson, that was 18th century, which was a very critical period in all aspects. So, in that period, he is telling Shakespeare is above all writers, at least above all modern writers. Modern means all those writers of the 18th century who considered themselves to be great scholars and in great knowledge of everything. Because, as you know, this was the period of neoclassicism. But he is telling Shakespeare is above them. Why? Because he holds up to his readers a faithful mirror of manners and of life. Shakespeare, as a true artist, holds the mirror. He doesn't give his own color, he doesn't give his own impression, but only reflects what is there in the life, the various aspects of life, its different manners, and all that. Other dramatists can only gain attention by hyperbolical or aggravated characters, by fabulous and unexampled excellencies or depravity, as the writers of barbarous romances invigorated the reader by giant and dwarf. So he is telling, in comparison to Shakespeare, other dramatists, both of his period as well as the period later on or prior to him, they seems to be much inferior. He is not using the word inferior because he was a great scholar, but he is telling that they do not have the excellence or fabulousness as Shakespeare has portrayed in his works. So in page 114, he is telling other writers disguise the most natural passions and the most frequent incidents so that he who contemplates them in the book will not know them in the world. So other writers, they disguise the natural passions and the incidents of life within their book, but Shakespeare is not disguising anything, he is not holding back anything. He is presenting all those things what are there in our life, in our living experiences, in our emotions and passions, and through that he is able to create the magic of art, the magic of drama. And by reading human sentiments in human language, by scenes from which a hermit may estimate the transactions of the world. And he is praising Shakespeare's use of language, use of characterization as unique. He is telling that Shakespeare has not created any original idea. All his dramas, their ideas that were borrowed. But what is the unique contribution of Shakespeare to English drama? That is characterization and the language. He has created such a variety of characterizations across the society and also gave them the voice, the language so appropriately that he is telling even a hermit who is living outside the society can know all about the society and social exchanges from the play of Shakespeare. So that is the greatness of Shakespeare. That Shakespeare in his dramas has created very lively, very realistic impressions of life. And with his excellencies, he also has some faults and failures. So, what are his faults? His first defect is that to which may be imputed most of the evil in the books in or in men. He sacrifices virtue to convenience and is so much more careful to please than to instruct. So in page 115, he is telling the first defect of Shakespeare is that he was a professional playwright. He didn't write the plays for the scholars or the academicians. He wrote it for the playhouse for commercial purpose. Therefore, he has sacrificed virtue to convenience. His plays are based on convenience, convenience of the contemporary stage, contemporary society, or the relationship between the playhouses and their customers, the audience. So, it is so much more careful to please than to instruct. So, in his plays, Shakespeare has not emphasized on instruction or morality. Rather, he emphasized on providing pleasure, because pleasure sells. Pleasure brings the income to the playhouse. And to some extent, Dr. Johnson found that his plays are probably without morality. The morality, without morality means, it doesn't mean it is without any moral sense. Shakespeare has the moral sense of humanity, the moral sense of the practical living experiences, not the morality or ethics of a philosopher. In page 116, he is telling the plots are often so loosely formed. So, the second allegation against, or the defect of Shakespeare, that Dr. Johnson is finding, is that his plots are very loose. Why? Because all of you know that Shakespeare, being a romantic dramatist, didn't follow the classical three unities properly. He violated the unity of time, the unity of space, and also unity of action. But mostly he violated the unity of time and place. Therefore, his plots are very loose. He wanted to incorporate so many characters, so much variety of characters and experiences of life into one play, that the structure of the play seems to be very loose. Next paragraph, he is talking about he had no regard to distinction of time or place. That means he is bringing the allegation against Shakespeare about his violation of the unity of time and place. And also violator of chronology. That means if you know the plays you have gone through, Shakespearean plays, you will find whether it is Othello or Hamlet. In Othello, the times unity of time is purely broken. The journey from one place to another is not quantified. So, in this way, what we find, that Shakespeare is not maintaining the three unities that had been prescribed by Aristotle. In page 117, the third paragraph is telling his histories, being neither tragedies nor comedies, are not subject to any of their laws. That Shakespeare is also violating the unity of action. His tragedies are not pure tragedies, there are comic scenes or comic elements, comic characters, or in his comedies there are pathos or pathetic incidents. So, in the last paragraph, he is telling in his other works he has well enough preserved the unity of action, but in some of his works he is able to preserve the unity of action. How? By bringing the comic elements, he has intensified the tragic intensity, or by bringing the pathos, he has intensified the comic element. And in page 118, Johnson is coming back to again praise Shakespeare by telling, but his plan has commonly what Aristotle requires, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Though he has loose plots, but his plots are having the proper sequence. That, as Aristotle had defined in his Poetics about a plot, that a plot must have a proper beginning, a proper middle, and proper end. So Shakespeare's plays are also having a proper beginning, a proper middle, and a proper end. To the unities of time and place he has shown no regard, and perhaps a nearer view of the principles on which they stand will diminish their value and withdraw from them the veneration which from the time of Corneille they have very generally received. And he is telling that though Shakespeare has not followed the Aristotelian concept of unity of time and place, but in spite of his violation, he is able to garner admiration, command admiration. Why? Because he has followed the Aristotelian concept of sequence of a plot. So, in that sequence of plot, with his great variety of characters and use of language, he is able to create the magic. Then, in page number 120, the last paragraph, Dr. Johnson is talking about the truth. The truth is that the spectators are always in their senses. He is finding another virtue of Shakespeare. What is that virtue? The virtue is that Shakespeare never gave a false impression to his audience, that whatever he is presenting on the stage are real. Rather, in his work, he all the time has kept the scope for making the audience feel that what is presented on the stage is not the absolute reality. And this difference between the audience and the stage is a unique character of Shakespeare. Therefore, Dr. Johnson appreciates Shakespeare, that Shakespeare is not in the category of those poets whom Plato wanted to banish because they are like the magicians or the pipers who are creating the false impression, but a true artist who brings the difference between the art and the audience, who induces that objective correlative, the objective appreciation of the art in spite of the knowledge that we are not a part of it. So, that is the greatest characteristic he ascribes to Shakespeare, for which he has a great reverence for Shakespeare. In page 122, in the middle, he is telling the delight proceeds from our consciousness of fiction. If we thought murders and treasons real, they would please no more. In elaborating that point, that objectivity of literature, he is telling that why we appreciate, why we find pleasure in the tragedy. Because in our consciousness, for example, when you are watching a movie, and in the movie you are finding that the villain is murdering someone, or a hero is taking revenge by killing someone, at that moment, definitely you don't feel that you are involved there. It is something unreal. In the heart of your heart, you never want or wish that someone should kill in this manner or someone should be killed in this manner. And that gives the pleasure. If someone really kills before you, suppose a murder takes place just before your eyes, it won't give you pleasure. Only when it is presented in a cinema or in a drama, where you can dissociate from that thing and you know in the heart of your heart that this is not real, then only pleasure comes. Therefore, he is telling Shakespeare is able to give us that pleasure. And Imitations produce pain or pleasure not because they are mistaken for realities, but because they bring realities to mind. So he is elaborating that when we are imitating these violences or tragedies that produce pain or pleasure, because we are not mistaking them for reality, we are not taking them as real, but because they bring realities to mind. Such things happen in our society, we think, therefore we appreciate. But such things are not happening before our eyes. If it will happen before our eyes, we cannot enjoy it. Then in page 123, in the second paragraph, he is telling a play read affects the mind like a play acted. Dr. Johnson is telling that a play, when we will go through, it should give us the feeling as if it has been acted before us. And here he is extending the concept of Aristotle. Aristotle said that drama is action, it is not narrative. But here he is telling drama is action. But even when we read it, the action should come into our imagination, our mind. And Shakespeare's dramas are excellent dramas from that point of view. Even when we read Shakespearean drama, in our mind's visage, in our mind's eye, we find as if those things are being enacted, and thus they give pleasure. In page 1 to 4, first line, he is telling, as nothing is essential to the fable but unity of action, and as the unities of time and place arise evidently from false assumptions, and by circumscribing the extent of the drama, lessen its variety. So he is telling that nothing is essential to the fable. Fable means it is one of the important components of drama out of the 6 components described by Aristotle in his Poetics. So he is telling that in a story, what is more important? It is unity of action. Unity of time and place come from false assumptions. So they only add to the beauty of the drama, but they are not that much essential as that of unity of action. Therefore, in Shakespearean plays, Shakespeare, by violating unity of time and place, but to a large extent maintaining the unity of action, has achieved the consistency of a play or the soul of a play. So, in this way, what happens? Dr. Johnson, who is very critical of each and every great writer and poet of English literature, is giving his praises, is showering his praises to Shakespeare, compliments to Shakespeare, in spite of finding out the defects. Why? Because he feels that somewhere, in spite of not in the boundary, Shakespeare has created a unique wholeness of being. He has been able to create a beauty even without the prescribed harmony.